words on a website and the way people show up are two very different things. How a business leader thinks that they're running the company may be very different from how the company is actually running. If a leader is struggling with hearing bad news or is struggling with um, accepting that their style of management doesn't work with everyone, then it won't ever work.
Welcome to Kanthi's Kaleidoscope, episode number 9. I'm Drew Leifheit, a journalist investigating how corporations and their leaders tick. So, who better to talk to than Kanthi Ford? Through her corporate change consultancy, Sadamana KFV, Kanthi has been helping international leaders in governments, multinationals, and not-for-profits to manage change for over 2 decades. In this episode, Kanthi and I will be speaking about why culture is the key to how well your company runs, as well as for its bottom line. That adds up to optimizing the financial and operational performance of your enterprise. First, we'll run through some examples of businesses that have strong positive cultures. To help you evaluate and improve your own corporate culture, we'll also run through the key ingredients of a strong workplace culture. And perhaps you're wondering what the best ways are for communicating elements of your company's culture? Kanthi will dish up some strategies that directors can use to help employees develop an understanding of their company's values. Hello, Kanthi.
Hi, Drew.
What would you say corporate culture really means in practical terms? And, how is a company's culture versus what's written on their website?
That's just the way that people show up in a company, fundamentally. So it's how decisions are made. It's how people behave. It's it's how the public sees the company. It's how the people who live in the company, who work in the company, see the company. It's how the business partners see the company. All of those things. So it's fundamentally the behaviors and how those behaviors all mesh together to start to create a view on how people show up, how the company shows up. Words on a website and the way people show up are two very different things. How a business leader thinks that they're running the company may be very different from how the company is actually running. And that can be a result of having to deal with shareholders. It can be because we all do it. We get quite entrenched in what we're doing and the people we talk to every day and what we see, as opposed to actually getting out there in the business and seeing what's really going on.
Right?
So, no, the company um, vision, values, aspiration, strategy that are on the website and in the company report may actually not be valuable to the person at the front line who's also um, leading company interface with the public, perhaps. So making sure that the two are connected is essential.
In terms of, is that a part of the whole process of demonstrating a high-performing culture? Is it necessary to communicate that both, I guess, both internally and externally?
Yes, absolutely. Because if people, if you rock up for work and you're doing what you think is the best thing, but is actually not what the company intends, then there's already a disconnect. If you're telling your shareholders that they're investing in this business that does X and actually you're delivering Y and your workforce is delivering Z, well, you've got an even bigger disconnect, haven't you? So it is important to be consistent in that understanding. So it's not communicating, because companies think that if you communicate the vision and the values, then you've done your job. It's actually everybody having a joint understanding of what it means to behave in a culture where that vision, and those values apply. So understanding what behaviors are needed to build that kind of vision for an organization.
Right. I mean, I imagine you can't really make that stuff up, right? So communicating it can't really be a PR exercise. Um, all those little actions or indicators have to be happening, I suppose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you say, it can't be a PR exercise. Us humans have got quite skeptical about PR at the best of times. So it's got to be sort of key levers. So explaining to people, getting people involved in what's the purpose of their organization, how they contribute to the value of the organization. That's when you start to create that coherence.
Mhm. In your experience, what would you say the warning signs are of a dysfunctional corporate culture? What do unhealthy company cultures look like on a day-to-day basis? If we're talking about behaviors or decision making.
Well, people leaving quite, lots of people leaving, is usually a really good is a numbers indicator, isn't it? People being unhappy. Quite often you hear people expressing a lack of, involvement in the organization or disaffection with their managers. People talking about being, intimidated by coming into the company, people not feeling part of something. Um, those are sort of indications quite early on. I mean, ultimately, you get toxic cultures, um, where people are absolutely not engaged in the organization.
Could you take us maybe a little bit into your process when approaching a potential client, let's say? How do you diagnose their culture? What sorts of indicators, data, or maybe stories do you listen to internally to figure out what's really going on inside a corporate culture?
A cross-section of things. So there's quantitative surveys, which, aren't always, effective because people get used to replying to surveys and playing the game, as they call it. And then there's the qualitative survey where you'd interview people individually. You'd carry out focus groups. You'd do site visits and just do walkarounds and actually see how people interact with each other and observe how people are working and talk to people generally. I believe in getting a whole range of different objective opinions on an organization, so then you have a baseline from which to work. Because without that objective external view, and usually it's multiple members of my team would carry out one of those activities. It wouldn't be one single person.
Mhm.
So we have multiple perspectives. We then make sure that we have a clear outcome, and then we make sure that the recommendations that we make are commensurate with what we've observed and where the organization wants to get to.
Neat, neat. What would you say that's like for the client? It sounds like it could almost be like magic if it's maybe something that they're not necessarily aware of. What's great?
If only they ever thought it was like magic. Invariably, it means holding up a mirror to them, and when we look in the mirror, we can never quite believe what we can see, can we? It's never quite our perception. So what they see like magic isn't quite the case. It's more sort of going through that whole Kubler-Ross change curve where, um, they kind of receive the results, they go through disbelief and loss, and they come out the other side. But yeah, I mean, it's never magic. And the other point I must make is that shifting a culture doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and it never stops because, as you talked about the economic uncertainties, an organization's got to be agile and shift constantly with what's going on in the world.
Mhm.
Otherwise they're stuck.
Right, right. Yeah, it does sound like an incredible challenge, and I'm curious if could you tell us maybe why cultural change is so difficult, and are there ways that leaders could just start nudging change in the right direction?
It's difficult because people are involved. And as many people as you've got the way perceptions are managed. So the first thing a leader should always do is become aware of how they're leading and get some insights into how they're showing up. So that's where things like emotional intelligence and self-awareness become a priority. That's the very first thing a leader should do. If a leader is struggling with hearing bad news or is struggling with um, accepting that their style of management doesn't work with everyone, then it won't ever work. So being aware of how we show up and being able to flex our style accordingly makes a big difference. So start with self and then you start to change the organization.
Mm, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, and what about that, Kanthi? As we're sort of headed towards the promised land, I'm wondering if you could give some practical advice for leaders regarding this whole topic. Where can they start? And what are the sort of first small real world actions that they can do to build a better culture?
Okay, so where would they start? Look at their team. Look at the team that they're running. Look at themselves, look at their team, see how their team are interacting and behaving, and then take a walk through their organization. Talk to some of the people in their organization, ideally anonymously, as in, not be, in the hybrid world, they're not always visible in any case. And just hear what people have to say about working in the organization, what they understand about the purpose of the organization. That's quite a good weather check as to where the organization is at the moment.
Hmm. Hmm. How difficult do you think it is for them to find time for that?
Time's a moving commodity. It depends how important it is.
Right,
True.
right, right. Well, it certainly sounds like a good investment of time. If instead of just kind of wondering, maybe why aren't things going the way we'd like them to?
Absolutely. Time, people always say, don't have time for that. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for that. But by not making the time, they actually are adding time to their day. If you don't make time to make sure that everybody's working with you, not against you, you're just being diluted constantly. It, it just is taking up more time. Organizations can perform quite effectively but not to their optimum. And I think that's where a lot of the companies end up. They just perform as opposed to performing as well as they can.
Mm. All right.
Perfect mediocrity.
Well, it certainly sounds like we should find some time to communicate within the organization so we can get at the nut that we need to crack.
It's a good starting point, indeed.
Exactly. Well, Kanthi Ford of KFV Consulting, thank you so much.
Thank you, Drew.